Hello and welcome back to the Spirit Lounge. Hope you guys are doing really well, and welcome to the next installment of the Upanisads. Today we're going to continue on with the author's precursor content and chapters, and go on to describing kind of the I suppose the archetypes or the different levels in which they've split up the ascent or the description of the all, similar to what the Gnostics did. So we'll jump straight on to that. I got the presentation on the screen here. Okay, here we go. So where we're going is we're going to talk about Brahman. This is the ultimate reality. It's also called absolute -- Brahman sometimes. We'll drop straight into it, so I won't go into describing it now. Okay, so the Upanishads, as we know, a very old religious text. The scripture is kind of a way of life rather than a religion. Hinduism is a religion formed out of it or around it. And the Vedic scripts were pulled together by mystics and seers and those who dedicated their lives in the search for what the absolute means, and also some of them put themselves into forest life to do so. And you can see that it's ranging over a period of time of 700 to 400 B.C.E. or B.C., where the Upanishads were written, but obviously the Vedas were much older because the Upanishads was the last writing of the fifth of them. There were only 4 Vedas, but the Upanishads were the spiritual esoteric content derived from them all. Okay, and there's 4 Vedas listed there. Okay, so we're going into what Brahman is, the ultimate reality underlying all phenomena. And this is talking about what we call source, the supreme divine, the one, the all. It's called absolute Brahman. That's what it's called within the Upanishads scripts or scriptures. So we're going to describe this. So the Upanishads raise the question: what is that reality which means identical and persist through change? The word used in the Upanishads to indicate the supreme reality is Brahman, or absolute -- Brahman. It's the root. So Bra is BRH, is the root, and to grow or to burst forth of. So Brahman is to burst off, or the root, to burst from the root. Samkara is a purification ceremony that's used in Vedic ceremonies activity, and it derives the word Brahma from the root of brati, to exceed. So it's all looking at exceeding or coming from a root, coming from a central place, exceeding or existing from that which all that is. Madhava, who's a Hindu philosopher, as the author writes, says Brahma is not a person, which is true. It's not a person as it is source itself, but it's a person as in you, as in the Brahma is actually within you. So it's a personal thing when it's within you in a private journey. But Brahma is not indicated as a human, as a person, as a being of form, which it is not. Brahma is not a person in whom qualities dwell in fullness. In the Rig Veda, the Brahma is used in the sense of sacred knowledge. So there's 2 different meanings. Different philosophers and seers at the time gave it different meanings, but it actually when it combines and coalesces together, they're indicating the same thing. In the Rig Veda, it's called sacred knowledge, and it's also sacred knowledge within the Upanishads as well. And the Gnosticism, if we remember what we were talking about there, they also talked about elevating one towards the absolute, the one, through the gnosis, which is gnosis is unveiling of knowledge. Okay, concrete expressions of spiritual wisdom, which is another definition of Brahman. Brahman is mantra or prayer. It's a practice towards reaching Brahman state. Gradually, it acquired the meaning of power or potency of prayer. It's a mysterious power, an essence of the thing denoted. In Brahmanas, Brahman denotes the ritual and so is regarded as omnipotent. He who knows Brahman knows and controls the universe. Brahman becomes the primal principle, nothing more ancient or brighter then this Brahman is effectively describing the single one, the absolute, the source, the triple Godhead, so forth. And he goes into further explanations of what the narrative. And the reason why the narrative is good is not just to have precursor understanding of what these terms mean, but it's also the author pulls in some information from the Vedas themselves. So it's good to read because it gives you a grounding, excuse me, of what the Vedas are actually saying. Okay, in later thought, Brahman meant wisdom of Veda, so that's knowledge. As divine origin was ascribed to the Vedas or Brahman, it's the same meaning. So the Vedas or the Vedas were knowledge. The inscribed in the Vedas were that which was gnosis or knowledge, which was described as Brahman, or divine origin, which is also Brahman. It's the same meaning. Brahman is sacred knowledge. It's a creative principle, the cause of all existence. It's a kinship between the offspring, the aspiring spirit of man, which is the spirit within, and the spirit of the universe, which is also the all. The wish to know the real implies that we know it to some extent. So what this suggests is that we would not wonder if there was an all, if we did not have that notion within us, a silent voice. And this is very true. So we wouldn't ask the question. It's what he's saying. The seers of thousands of years ago, and even us today, would not ask the question or feel something greater than our physical selves, our ego minds, our worship of science technologies to give answers, and so on and so forth. If it wasn't something that was already within us, nudging itself to us to the surface. So this is what it's saying. This is suggesting that we wouldn't even ask if that thing that we are being nudged towards experiencing or discovering did not exist as a silent voice within us. It is because the real knows itself in us, which it does. The desire for God, the feeling that we are in a state of exile. So this is saying that, suggesting that we are seeking something, but we are in this body, detached or somewhat dismissal of a greater force. So therefore we're in exile of it. We're detached from it. We've run away from it. We're hiding from it. And but we know that is within us because there's a constant urge, a nudge that comes up even for the most darkest beings. There's that nudge, even though it's depressed within them, still exists. There is a greater reality within us, though we cannot tell what it is. God cannot be known or experienced except through his own act. This is the act of unveiling. This is the act of gnosis. This is the act of vibrational and frequency ascent, as we were discussing, turning the pages of the divine book, which unravels information to us. Knowledge of, which is through his own act, knowledge of Brahman due to the working of Brahman in us. That's true, our spirit within us. Prayer is the witness to the spirit of the transcendent, divine, immanent in the spirit of man. So he's talking about prayer being the way how we communicate with that spirit within us. Well, actually, it's how we communicate, it's our conversation with that which is greater. The theologian accepts the first principle of being as the absolute one. The philosopher comes to it by process of meditation. So he's talking about the theologian studies and comes to a mental state that there may be the possibility of there being an absolute one. A philosopher or a seer or someone who's dedicated to spiritual practice comes to that from an inner knowing and a much greater attachment through silence, meditation, prayer, and so on. It expresses simultaneously God's consciousness of himself and his own absolute self-absorbed being. Not being is sometimes said to be the first principle. Not being, that is, not aware of self, which is physical. World made of the infinite Brahman. The Katha Upanishads tells us that fire, having entered the universe, assumes all forms. The Chandogya Upanishads makes out that fire is the first to evolve. From fire comes water, and from water comes earth. There's a lot of discussion here about water being the birth of all that is. It's being the manifesting form, And in the Gnostics, it also talks about the waters, things being sprung from the waters. So I wanted to pull that out to ensure that we remember the words that are used consistently through scripture that we will be passing through. Gnosticism, and this one has a lot of terminology, a lot of reference, a lot of analogies, lots of metaphors that are used the same way. Okay, in regard to the development of the universe, so remember this is, we've had different understanding of it since, but in regard to the development of the universe, the Upanisads look upon the earlier state of the material world as extension in space, which is kind of true. It's looking at, there is a void, the material force, or that which manifested the material force in which we experience, came from space, came from not the space we see above us as in sci-fi space. It's talking about the emptiness of all possibility, of formlessness. There's something there that then manifested energy, vibration, frequency, force to then create matter and thus form. The feature is vibration represented to us by sound. So it's saying there is a sound, or there is a vibration in the universe that is the precursor to matter, and in this word is called sound, and that's what the Om symbol is. The Om symbol for me is a definition of Om being the vibration of the universe, the sound that permeates through the universe, and that is what this is sound. That's what the Om symbol for me actually represents. Vibration by itself cannot create forms unless it meets with obstruction. Absolutely, what this means is that energy is vibrating at different frequencies. Everything in the universe is boundless energy. Energy is all possibility and probability, a seamless stream of energy which is not observed because it's in the darkness of the void from which it emits, but it needs to have an obstruction or something to form, to manifest energy or frequency into form. And this is also something that is similar in quantum physics as well, with waves and wave energy. The interaction in air, which is the next modification, this is where the Vedic philosophies come in, and we know that it's slightly different, obviously different to this, but the manner in which they're explaining how matter is created is not dissimilar to what quantum physics and other sciences are talking about. The interaction in air, which is the next modification. The third is light and heat. So it says vibration first meets air, or is obstructed by air, or the manifested into air. Then hits the first is vibration, the second is air, the third is light and heat, and have stable forms, and so a denser medium of water is produced, and then water comes up. Further state of cohesion is found on earth. So water is the manifesting principle at the end, where most manifestation is come from, the earth being the physical that comes from the water. And then obviously the cohesion of all these things, earth, air, fire, heat, water, comes together as the earth. Development of the world is a process of steady, subtle akasha, which is essence of things or space, objects built up by the combination of these 5 elements. So our senses experience depends on them. So it's saying that, it's suggesting that the universe is built up by forces. The forces here are vibration, air, light and heat, water, and then the matter being earth, which is the 5. And then it's saying we experience these. The sense experience depends on them. So we experience these 5 forms through our senses. Vibration comes the sense of sound. So in vibration creates sound. Sound is then action. Action is vibrations of the touch. And light is a sense of sight, water is a sense of taste, and earth is a sense of smell. So these are the senses. Okay, in the Taittiriya Upanishads, a pupil is asked to supply the content or the nature of Brahman by his own reflection. So he goes a pupil is asked by a guru or a seer to go and understand what the nature of Brahman is, and come with his own answer. He says the first that he perceives is matter, which is called anna in Sanskrit, which is as a basic principle. And then he thinks to himself, matter cannot account for all forms of life. And then he looks upon life, which is prana. Life is called prana in Sanskrit, as the basis. He goes, well, what's life? Life again cannot be the ultimate principle. So matter is animate, inanimate, but everything has life, principle within it, a prana within it. Life again cannot be the ultimate principle. So he asks again, there must be something more. And then he was led again to the nature of a consciousness, i.e. an awareness, which is called manas in Sanskrit, which he regards as the ultimate principle. Then they talk about consciousness has different grades, which is instinctive consciousness. So this is talking about I want to explain this on my own way in a moment, but I'll just talk about there is instinctive consciousness of animals, there's intellectual consciousness of human beings. And he says intellectual consciousness is Brahman, man alone. It's the capacity to change himself, transcend his limitations. Even this is incomplete because it is subject to discords and duality. So it talks about the consciousness of animals, intellectual consciousness of human beings. Well, that is because everything has manas in it, the conscious divine consciousness within it. It is the vessel in which it sits, which is a representation of the state of the consciousness, if you like. But it's also the vessel which, and some people may flip it on its head and say, well, this is saying that the state of consciousness is in an animal because the consciousness has only achieved the state of an animal. It's in a plant because it's only achieved the state of a plant. It's in a human being because it's achieved the state of intellectual consciousness, i.e. the power of intellectual thought through a greater capacity of mind. But it also can flip it on its own head and say, well, consciousness is all the same, but it's not to be able to be expressed. So it's the vessel in which is the limitation. The vessel in which it is gives it the only ability to express with what that vessel is allows it to express. A plant can only be a plant, can only express itself as a plant within the limitation of its vessel. An animal is the same, depending on what animal it is. A stone, a rock, a particle of sand, and obviously ourselves, which have the greatest capacity on the earth plane to express ourselves through a much more expanded ability to think of intellectual thought, or therefore to express that through our thinking, our words, action, words, thoughts, intentions, and five senses, and so forth, which are also expanded, although animals do have a greater spectrum of sight, of smell, of hearing, and so forth. Okay, man's intellect aims only in making guesses. So it's trying to say man's intellect can only guess what is there. There must be a power in man, a deeper principle. And then the pupil finally arrives at the truth that spiritual freedom or delight, which is ananda, there must be that. He apprehends the supreme unity that lies behind all the lower forms. Some affirm that ananda is the nearest to absolute reality, which is spiritual freedom and delight. But it is not itself the absolute reality. Experience gives us peace, which is true. This is spiritual freedom and delight. Spiritual freedom leads to delight. Spiritual freedom is complete freedom of self. When you move through life through the spiritual guide, your own internal spiritual guide, which is what this channel is actually all about. The Upanishads assumes that the naturalistic theory of evolution cannot be accepted. The world is not viewed as an automatic development without any intelligent cause. Matter, life, mind, intelligence are different forms of existence. So it's suggesting that it doesn't just happenstance. Something didn't just occur out of nothing because there's nothing there really. There is an intelligence behind the forces that manifest matter, the forces that govern matter in its own realms, and the forces that were precursor to matter and consciousness and all these things. There must be something else. There is an intelligence behind it, which of course we all are understand if you're watching this. Okay, Jalaluddin Rumi, who's a theologian level and a Sufi mystic, which will know him as Rumi is quite well known. This was a passage that he wrote, which I quite liked. I died a mineral and became a plant. I died a plant and rose an animal. I died an animal and I was a man. Why should I fear? When I was I less by dying. Yet once more I shall die as a man, to soar with blessed angels, but even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God perishes. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become that which no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non-existence proclaims to him we shall return. So this is a really good passage here. It's effectively saying that we should not fear death, and I am a proponent of that, because we only a physical body just passes. The avatar must pass on, or must cease to have a purpose ultimately in life. Once we've achieved all we can achieve, the body, being a body in the same body forever, doesn't have a purpose. But he's saying that he's already achieved what he calls from a material perspective, the final element, the final state that can be of man. After that, he goes into further states of closer and closer to the grace. So every death brings him closer to God. So he welcomes, let me not exist, for non-existent proclaims to him we shall return. So he understands recursive births bring him closer and closer to the ascent to the all. Life is not the mechanical resultant of material forces, but now called an emergent element of the incalculable. Life emerges when the material conditions are available. Well, this is true. Life will emerge when conditions allow life to emerge, depending on what kind of life that is. Matter aspires for life. So it's saying that matter is always urging to be experiencing itself or aware in a much greater way. But life is not produced by lifeless particles. It's produced with mind. Mind cannot be produced. Without mind, intelligence qualifies. Mind cannot be produced without mind. So it's saying that even our minds, our intelligence cannot be produced without another intelligence. Intelligence qualifies the mental living. Nature is working on intention. It is essentially the instrument of the Supreme Being, right? So basically, effectively saying the Supreme Being is that intelligent force, is that intelligent mind. It has the intention and a purposeful will, which is driving the forces from within it, the void from within where the divine is, and emanates out the forces for all forms of life to exist, or to have the foundation to exist and create whatever it will create. Remember, all the forces, the universe is cognizant of itself as well. It's a living, animate thing. Everything within it is a living, animate thing feeding into the living, animate thing of the universe or universes. And therefore, everything is aware of itself and has intention as well. There is purpose working itself. Okay, here we go. So where was I? Okay. There is purpose working itself. Matter cannot raise itself. Cannot raise itself to a higher level by the help of the higher self. Something above it. Excuse me. The lower is the material for the higher. So it's saying the matter realm is the playground or material space for the higher realms. Higher realms being higher vibration of thought, frequency, energy, a consciousness movement into the all. Life is the matter for mind. Intellect is form for the mind, and matter for the spirit. Eternal is the origin. In the beginning, the world was Brahman, i.e. the world was just the divine itself. There was no world. What was just was the divine itself, sitting, contented in its own state, which was perpetual activity. In other words, it was always active, and through purposeful will or intention and thought, the forces of creation were allowed to unveil themselves as they will through their own free will and awareness. Brahman is not sufficient to itself, unifies the world of the physicist, hierarchy of all kin, so is soulless matter, which is the Brahman. Plato's world architect, so Plato's world architect, Plato called the Brahman the world architect, Aristotle called it the world mover. If there is ordered development, progressive evolution, it is because there is the divine principle at work in the universe. Cosmic process is one of unceasing change, a duality which is perpetually in conflict, is perfection, is heaven, it's chaos in dark waters. Dark waters doesn't mean the dark realms that we talked about before. He's talking about the void, which has light with its lightlessness light. A void is lightlessness light. It's the emanation of pure love and grace, but it's a void of darkness. There's nothing. If you looked at it, there'd be nothing. But you cannot look at it because you are it. But it's a chaos of dark waters, waters being that which manifests. Okay, creation moves upwards towards the divine. So we move as creation matter, we move upwards consciously towards the divine through transcendent movement. It's a union between spirit and manifesting matter. It's a revelation of spirit on earth is accomplished. That is true. This is what the purpose is we are supposed to reveal the revelation, salvation, redemption. What are all these things? These are not praying at the foot of anything. It is the unveiling of the divine within you through gnosis and knowledge to bring yourself to higher states of ascent, frequency and understanding. The primordial God, which is Hiranyagarbha, is the primal being, and it produces the primal water. I've got a slide which goes through these, so I won't explain it on this slide. From this comes the primordial God as the firstborn. So it does talk about Hiranyagarbha and another god, which is like Barbello. Remember Barbello, which was the first one from the divine force created Barbello, who then manifested through, who was called a virgin, manifested all that exists from within her. The Upanishads speak of the same kind of concept, but call it something very different. It's called the golden germ. The world is fixed in him, this Barbello type being, this Hiranyagarbha. The world is fixed in him. All beings and all worlds are strung like the beads of a necklace. He is called Brahman. Brahma is a consciousness. So Brahman is the divine absolute. Brahma is the consciousness. We'll go through this in a moment. In the Rig Veda, Hiranyagarbha is the golden germ. Enters after the first action, i.e. the action being that the absolute creates these forces, which is Prakriti, which is original or natural form. Is treated as unconscious, is the influence of Mahat, which is the great, or Buddhi, which is the intellect. Cosmic intelligence, Hiranya, Garbha. Buddhi is the first element of the linga, or the body, which is basically, the linga is the body, the Buddhi is the consciousness awareness, which is within forms. So they talk about Ahamkara, which is a self or being with nature. It has 10 sense organs. This may or may not come up, so I put this down anyway in the Upanishads once we get into them. The 5 are perception, which is smell, sight, hearing, touch, taste, which we know. And the other ones are the mouth, which is to speak, the hands, the feet, the excretion organs, and the reproductive organs, which we all know what they are. This may or may not come up, I put it here just for FYI interest. Okay, so this is a slide to spend a little bit more time on. So these are just some of the archetypes or metaphors that they're using, or the archetypes, or the split bits of the absolute that is created. This is similar to the Barbello and the other eons that are created in Gnosticism. So if we go from 1 down, there's only 5 here which are mainly to be understood, because these will be repeated, I believe, in the Upanishads quite frequently. So you have the absolute. So this is the absolute Brahman. absolute Brahman, Brahman dash absolute, which is all possibility, spaceless timelessness. This is what we call the divine itself, the silence of the divine force. It's not a being, it's not male, it's not female, it cannot be described in any way. It is the unknowable, the unfathomable, which is the absolute Brahman. And below that is the Brahma, which is the pure consciousness. It's the super cosmic transcendent cosmos which sustains the cosmos. This is what's within us as well. This is what we're trying to develop, move into a Brahmic state of pure consciousness, move our consciousness transcendence up into that state. Then it talks about Ishvara, which is the Supreme Lord or the sum total of the universe, and it outlasts matter, if you like. So there's the absolute, which is the divine, the pure consciousness, which is the aspect of the divine within us, if you like, the Brahmic spirit, the state of which we can emanate within our spirit. Then it's talking about the Supreme Lord, which is Ishvara. And then it talks about Hiranyagarbha, which is the world soul. This is the creative power. This is the golden germ. This, I would say, the Hiranyagarbha is what I would call the Barbello. If I had to compare it to something, it would be the Barbello eon within the Gnostic texts. And then obviously it's the manifestation of matter, which is then the world. Then it talks about humanity. Then it talks about the being within form itself. So let's just talk about humanity here. The Buddhi is the seed, the spiritual awareness within the all. So this is our Buddhic seed, our spirit, which is trying to reach a Brahma state of pure consciousness. Within there, it talks about how it's having 3 circles of matter. Now, this could also be, these are expressions, if you like. So if we move from bottom up, from the very lowest circle, the very closest circle to matter, to body, is tamas, which is lethargy, darkness, and ignorance. This is where you attach close only to the body. You think that's all you are. It creates ignorance. Then it's also attachment to a lower chakra frequencies of desire, our loins and so forth, of greed, of oppression and suppression, of control. These are darker frequencies. The opposite of love, for example, it creates lethargy. But this would almost be, I would say, lethargy to see anything much more other than just seeking darker frequencies. And then the second circle, or radiant beyond that, as we move outward, is rajas, which is passion, energy, of movement. This is talking about seeking something greater, or moving outward into greater experience, greater awareness, or gnosis, or knowledge. And sattva, which is the third radiant or circumference around us, which is for purity, wholesomeness, and virtue, which is also an expanding or much more balanced ego. These things I found quite interesting. I think these may come up in the Upanishads as well. Okay, so the author continues on. We have the Supreme Self, the Absolute, the Supreme Self as the eternal subject. The Supreme is generally conceived as light. Yes, we do see the divine Godhead as light. We're moving towards light. We're saying that this is of light, this is of dark. So this is what we call the subject, or the conception of what we call the Supreme. Light is the principle of communication. Light is also information. It's also knowledge. That's what light is. Hiranyagarbha shares the fate of all creation. Remember, Hiranyagarbha was the Barbello type Eonic, the manifestating form, the waters of all creation. Ishvara is prior to the world soul. The world soul is Hiranyagarbha. Ishvara, as the supreme transcendent reality, treats Brahma as the demiurge of creation. So this is not the demiurge as in the Gnostic demiurge, which was the lower, the superior archon. This is not that lower being. It's treats Brahma as demiurge of creation. Creation is a free expression of divine mind. It's saying consciousness is the expression that then creates matter. That is the substance of matter, the substance of creation. that forms it and animates it. This is what it's called. That demiurge just means to manifest and to create as well. Okay, the manifestation of Hiranyagarbha, which is cosmic intelligence, and the creation of Ishvara, which is supreme Lord, is the free self-determination of God. So it's saying that the divine absolute Brahman created these as from his own free will, from its own free will. It belongs to the absolute, abide of all possibility. An abode of all possibility is freely chosen for accomplishment. So this is we talked about this many times. The void is a realm of all possibility and probability. It's a void of pure love, pure light. Light is force of principle of matter. It's information. It's gnosis. It's creation, preservation, and destruction, and so forth. It's all of these forces. And it's saying that the divine is in the abode of all possibility, which it is. We are all in the abode of all possibility, even in matter realm. This is a realm for us to manifest whatever we wish. It's up to us what we do, and we will manifest just as the divine manifested, was the source of all things through what it called a chosen accomplishment, which was free will. In other words, choice. We are also freely able to choose for accomplishment anything within the abode of possibility, probability, which is what this is. That's why I pull this out. Not enter it from the outside. It's talking about the absolute doesn't enter from the outside. It is inherent within it. Is active or inactive. This is true. Life is active or inactive, animate or inanimate. Everything is life. Everything is Brahman, or has Brahma within it as well. We get the conception of an absolute God, a Brahman Ishvara, being of infinite possibility and creative freedom, which is what we also are. That's why be mindful of what we create through the energy and frequency that we emanate. Why should absolute Brahman, supreme entity, be which is perfect, move out into this world? Well, it's because it's saying here, well, if the absolute Brahman, which is the divine one, why should it move out into this world if it's perfection? Because it also possesses the power of creativity, because of its free choice, because of intention and purpose. Everything has intention and purpose, and this is the same as above, so below. This is a wonderful last sentence here. It's because we are also here as expressions of Brahman, as expressions of absolute Brahman. We are here by Brahman experiencing itself, an expression of it. Everything that we are is it. Everything that is it is within us, within the spirit. The Brahma is what we're trying to achieve through the connection with the spirit. We are also power of creativity and free choice. We can manifest whatever we wish our experiences to be in this earth plane. And we will incarnate into whatever we leave, and we'll continue to incarnate until we achieve that moksha state, or the originating state in the Gnostic text. So remember, what's around us isn't a result of the absolute creating it around us. The duality that exists within us, around us, is not a manifestation of the absolute. It is us that create these dualities. It is us that create famine, war, or allow it. It is us that allow the few to obfuscate and to destroy love in the world and try to overlay it with darkness. It is us, it's humanity that does this through the power of our own creativity, free will, choice to do nothing or something. So like you say, we can be any one of these circles, these inner circles. We can just be ignorant. We can allow darkness to manifest. Or we can start having movement towards greater movement of energy into passion of enlightenment or knowing and gnosis to create more wholesome and more purity and wholesomeness within our existence, and therefore the existence of humanity as a whole. So it's choices. This is very true. As above, so below. Okay, so let's move into next. Let's continue. Okay, in Ishvara, which is the remember, the Ishvara is the supreme Lord, the sum total of the universe. So this was the Hiranyagarbha was the, I believe, I would say The Barbelo, the Ishvara, would be the intermediary state of the absolute to the Barbelo state as well. If those who went through the Gnostic series with me will know what I'm talking about. In Ishvara, we have found two elements, which is called wisdom, Siva, and power, which is called Sakti. By latter, power, Sakti, the supreme, is measured and defined. So it's talking about this. This means that we see what the divine is through the physical power of matter. It creates matter, in other words. So this is how we define and are measuring the force of the divine, so that which we experience in matter. Between the absolute and the world soul, which is Hirana Garbha, which is the world soul, is the creative consciousness. This is the Ishvara. This is the Ishvara. Between the absolute and the world soul, which is the Hirana Garbha, is the creative consciousness, which is the Ishvara. Personality is a personality of God. Is not to be thought of as a greatly human quality as we know them. So we have the absolute, the God as creative power, which is the Ishvara, the God immanent in this world, which is not separate to us. The spirit, the world spirit must be there before there can be the world. So it's talking about the Hiranyagarbha must be there before the world is manifest. There are four states, so therefore there are four. It comes to the conclusion of saying there are four statuses, which is the absolute, which we've talked about, the creative spirit, which is the Ishvara, and the world spirit, which is the Hiranyagarbha, and the world itself. So, from the Gnostic text, you could transpose any of these. Hiranyagarbha or the Ishvara could be the Barbelo together, or one of them. The Taittiriya Upanishads says the absolute Brahma manifested is Viraj, which is excellence everywhere in the universe. The personal God, Hiranyagarbha, and Ishvara are protecting destroyer of the universe. So this is. I'm going to display all of the main deities within Hinduism, but the three that these go into, so they're further split. So the absolute creates the Ishvara eon. Let's talk about Ishvara deity, and then that below that is the Hiranyagarbha deity, which is where matter is the waters of the waters which create matter are emanated from. But Ishvara becomes a further derivative into three other deities or demi-deities. This is Brahma, which is the creator. It's not the destroyer. Apologies for that. Vishnu, which is the preserver, and Shiva, which is the destroyer. You'll remember these. So Shiva is sometimes Shiva, which is the god in the circle, which is actually outside CERN. A big statue of Shiva is outside CERN. Vishnu, which is Preversa, and Brahma is the creative force. So there are three, a triad of forces, which is what the Ishvara is further split into. So you can see how this is very, very similar to how the Gnostics did this. They had eons which are further split into other eons, which were archetypes for forces of nature, cosmic bodies, forces of man and behaviors of man. There are eons and eons. There are eons of eons, in other words. Just like there are many, many, many days. There is a plethora of deities. There's a pantheon of deities out there representing the very same thing. Absolute is not found in things or material things. Absolute is not represented by the thing itself. It is in its way nothingness, which is true. The tongue of man cannot truly express or human intelligence conceive. Yes. The words of Plotinus, another philosopher and theologian, we say what he is not. So it's talking about, before this it was saying that we speak of the absolute in negative terms. We talk about it negatively. We speak about it in negative terms. So it's just saying that we say what he is not. This is a negative term for the absolute. We cannot say what he is, another negative way of approaching what the absolute is. Sunyata describes, which is the sunyata, which is a voidness that constitutes ultimate reality. So they're saying that the absolute is sunyata, which is a voidness. This is something that I've been saying for a long time. This is has been my perception for quite a long time before I read this, that the divine is actually just a voidness. It's a emptiness that contains everything. It sounds like an oxymoron there, doesn't it? But it's not. It's a void that constitutes the ultimate reality, which it's sunyata. In Buddhist philosophy, it is a non-duality, which is Advaita, or absolute is all inclusive, light. It's not light, but it's light. It's a not light containing all light. It desire, it is non-desire. It is anger, it is not anger. Brahman cannot be defined. Is said to be sat of being, which is said to be sat, which is sat, which is Vedic for being. It's the sit or which is Sanskrit for consciousness. Sat is Sanskrit for being, and Ananda, which is Sanskrit for bliss. It's all of these things, of course. Absolute consciousness in which there is non-consciousness. So it's an awareness of consciousness in which there is also non-consciousness. It is all things, all possibility and probability. It is no suffering or negation of bliss. Suffering is due to an obstacle, which is true. Suffering, we suffer when there is an obstacle before us. Or an obstacle can also be the negation of spirit from within us, why we don't understand, or we've detached from the spirit, therefore we produce and create suffering. Suffering is due to an obstacle. All delight arises from the realization of something withheld. That's right. This is talking about, remember I mentioned before that the path laid before you can be one of divine guidance or divinely imprinted before one. If we are attaching to the divine and not just giving ourselves to fate, there is no such thing. There's only a small element of our lives which are fateful, predefined by ourselves. The rest of it is free will, all creation, all creativity, free motion from ourselves. If we're aligned through that, the choices we make for actions, words, thoughts, and intention to create the material experience that we wish, but if it's wrapped in divine motion, then that path will be free of obstacles that are artificial and made through the non-realization of something we've held. So if we are completely detached from it, then we are doing everything within our physical senses. We are fighting against external forces constantly. We are allowing that which is in this world to impose itself on our perceptions, our awareness of things, and therefore obstacles are created, therefore suffering is manifest in our lives. But we can also realize, when we realize something greater, which is saying realizing of something we withheld, this path can be much, much more of ease. And I can tell you, this is exactly how my life has been. I'm not speaking again from just reading these words. Everything I'm talking about here is something I've already been through. So my life is sometimes seen as quite a blessed. I'm very blessed in my life, I know this, but it wasn't always this way. As I mentioned, for a decade or so, I lost that which was withheld, and it became a life of obstacle, and therefore of suffering of my own volition and my own creation. By surpassing of the limit, self-expression of the absolute, all forms are forms of one immutable being. Okay, I believe this is the last slide. The Sarvepalli Upanishads speak of the one God besides whom there is no second. That's true. Who creates all the worlds. Is the end of time rolls them up again. So at the end of time, everything rolls back into the absolute. I don't believe that will ever occur, by the way. I think the eternal creation is left to be what it will be. I don't think that which is manifest will just eternally manifest into the expansion of all things, because there is no end, there is no limitation, remember. He lives in all things and yet transcends them. It fill the whole world yet remain beyond its confines. Difference in Brahman in itself is beyond manifestation, and Brahma is the universe which is in manifestations. Talking about the absolute dash Brahman is not only within manifestation, but it's also in everything beyond manifestation. The real is at the same time being realized. So it's talking about the real is the absolute is being realized in everything that we experience. Nirakara, which is Vedic for formlessness, and Sakara, which is Vedic for with form, are different aspects of the same reality. So you can see there's many Vedic words, Sanskrit words, that describe many ways. There's many ways to describe the absolute because it is everything, of course. Waters are initially at rest. Again, waters comes up. At rest comes up. That was also repeated many times in the Gnostic texts. And so free from waves and forms. So this is talking about the void. Remember the void, which is Sankara, which is the void where the waters, which is the infinite light, is at rest. The waters of which everything's manifest, which is the Hiranyagarbha deity. But it was at rest until there is action put upon it, free will, motion manifest from intention, which initially it was free from waves and forms, which means it was still at rest. The first disturbance comes, creates forms, and is the seed of the universe, in which intention is the disturbance, thought is the initial manifestation of all of that, and from there the forces of the universe take form into matter, which is energy basically in vibration and frequency, reaching obstacles or perceived by senses. Hiranyagarbha creates the world according to the eternal Veda, or knowledge. In other words, is created through divine knowledge or through the principles of divine knowledge, which has within itself eternally. So knowledge is within everything eternally, in other words. Brahman is the unity of all that is named Hiranyagarbha or Brahma, which is the consciousness and is the world's soul and subject to changes. Ishvara is not subject to these changes. So this is the deity above the Hiranyagarbha. The Vedic deities are subordinate to Ishvara. So it's talking about, so Ishvara in this way could have been the Barbello, because remember the Barbello eon within the Gnostic text created all the other eons. So it's saying that Ishvara here is above all the other deities below it. So it's also a manifester of the Hiranyagarbha, which is it's deity, it's the action of Ishvara is called the creative force, which is then named Hiranyagarbha. So this is a deity, but it's actually an action, an activity of the universe, in other words. We thus have the four sides of the whole. The transcendental universal being, which is the absolute and Brahma, absolute Brahman. The causal principle, which is the Ishvara. The innermost essence of the world, which is the creative force, which is the Hiranyagarbha, and the manifest world itself, which is the physical plane. But of course, all of that is also wrapped in super transcendental consciousness, which is called Brahma, which is linked to the absolute being the transcendental consciousness, which is basically the absolute is really super transcendental presence, being. We call that consciousness. Okay, so we've gone through what Brahma is, Brahma and Brahman, and all of the various deities there. This has helped us go through some of the understanding of that. There was another chapter on going through some more terms, which we'll be going through. And remember, the second coming is you, as we've described many times before. All the texts and scriptures, if we understand them, are asking us to do this and to become what it is. We seek not just to practice it when it suits us, is the main message here. And again, there's a book here that I wrote which has some of the basic knowledge, basic information, the foundational stuff that I put to paper, which is touching on many things that we talk about thus far. Okay, I want to say, here we go. There we go. Thank you for listening to this again and for your time in this Upanishads journey, which will be on for some time because the book is very large. We have it's 150 pages so far, but we are nearly over halfway through, and then we'll dive straight into the Upanishads but I'll let you know when that's going to happen. There'll probably be another few more videos of precursor information before that happens. But please be patient and stay with us on the journey, and hope you're enjoying this. And again, thank you for your patience and time. It's much appreciated that anyone takes an interest in the things that I do, and I'm blessed by that it helps anyone. And thank you again for listening, and God bless you all. Thank you.